I'm Mark Caro, and welcome to episode 226 of Caropop. If you'd like to throw us some support and help keep this thing going, which we'd really appreciate, please go to caropop.com. Our guest this week is one of my favorite rhythm guitarists who writes great songs for one of my favorite bands, Bill Million of the Feelies. This New Jersey band is marking its 50th anniversary with concerts May 22nd and 23rd at White Eagle Hall in Jersey City, New Jersey. For the Friday show, they'll be playing one of my Desert Island discs, the 1986 album The Good Earth, in its entirety. The Saturday concert features a full performance of the band's trailblazing debut, 1980's Crazy Rhythms. Additional material and special guests are expected both nights. The Feelies haven't traveled much in recent years, usually limiting themselves to a couple weekends worth of shows on the East Coast annually. But these Jersey City dates are the only two shows scheduled for 2026. Will they be the Feelies' live swansong? We ask Million. He also takes us back to the band's formation in 1976, when he and lead singer-guitarist Glenn Mercer began playing and writing songs together. People who follow the Feelies know of their admiration of such bands as the Stooges and the Velvet Underground. The Feelies' 2023 album, Some Kind of Love, features energized live covers of Velvet Underground songs. But the Feelies' crazy rhythmic element was in place from the start as well. Million describes the roots of this love of percussion even when played on guitars. He also gets into the guitars themselves, what he plays, what Mercer plays, and how they figured out the best combination of instruments and sounds. Did Million always know the Feelies would return during the 6-year period, personnel changes, and various side projects between Crazy Rhythms and The Good Earth? What was Million doing while the Feelies stopped playing between 1992 and 2008? Does Million feel more magic when the band's in the studio or on stage? Who sets the rhythm and tempo when the Feelies perform live? Does he agree with XTC's Dave Gregory that when it comes to playing, you've got to use it or lose it? And what are the Feelies' plans for recording new material, and how might their instrumentals-oriented alter ego, the Willies, fit in? I'm so glad I got to talk with Million before I catch those Jersey City shows, and whether or not you'll be there, please enjoy this Caropop conversation with Bill Million. I was at the 40th anniversary show in Maplewood, and I'm like, wait, that was 10 years ago? It just seems like it wasn't that long ago, but I guess time kind of flies when you're hitting these milestones. Is this the 50th anniversary of when you sort of started off as the Out Kids?
No, it's the 50th anniversary as the Feelies. I'm not really very good at keeping track of such things. The band tends to rely on Dave, who keeps a diary. So he's got very precise dates as to when we do certain things, keeps set lists and, travel experiences, things like that. So we tend to lean on him. But according to him, it's 50 years.
Right. Well, yeah, my impression was that you were very briefly called the Out Kids and then changed the name to the Feelies.
It was a different band, different players, even though the commonality was Glenn, Dave, and myself. But we had a different singer, and we played different music back then. It was more like a cover band, even though we started bringing in some originals. But when that band broke up, that's when we formed the Feelies, and things changed kind of dramatically.
And you knew Glenn from high school? And Dave?
Not Dave from high school. So Glenn went to a different high school than I went to. However, the high schools were right next to each other, separated only by a wooded area where a lot of the kids would go and hang out. There was like an old beeswax factory that was smack in the middle of the woods. In fact, if you're familiar with the Good Earth album cover,
Sure.
the back of that cover was us by the Beeswax factory. So there was that, and Glenn was kind of a neighbor in the same town. Dave lived in another town, so that's how that all came about.
And did you pretty much develop your musical taste on parallel tracks? Like you guys like the same stuff?
Yeah, I think so. Not so much Dave, but both Glenn and I were kind of listening to the same music. There was a radio station in New Jersey. Danny Fields in particular had a show, and it was a different iteration of what is now known as WFMU. It was WFMU back then, but it was out of Upsala College. And Danny Fields would play a lot of the Stooges, the MC5. He'd play like demo tapes because he was instrumental in getting those groups signed to Elektra and played, like I said, the Modern Lovers, a band out of Detroit or Ann Arbor called Up. That was a White Panther band. So he played a lot of that. WBAI in New York played a lot of like Velvet Underground. So a lot of that came, I think for both of us, that's what we were listening to at the time.
Yeah, when I talked with Glenn, I mean, obviously, people think of you and they think of the Velvets and the Stooges, but he also mentioned sort of this African drumming music that sort of informed everything as well.
Yeah, well, that again, stations like WBAI would play a lot of that. A lot of really eclectic music, and then you have music from the 50s like Bo Diddley, which was, that whole rhythm approach and beat was pretty appealing to us as well. I was going to say there's a quote in one of the Lou Reed books where I guess Jonathan Richman when he was really young, encountered Lou in Harvard Square. And he approached him, and because he saw Lou was walking through, I guess, getting ready for a show there, and he had his guitar, so he approached him, and he asked him if he was Lou Reed, and he said, "Yeah," and he said, "I'm a big fan of your band. I love your band." And Lou asked him what he loved about it, and he said, "I love the fact that the guitars sound like drums."
Mm.
So it's true. It's like that downstroke and that was part of our appeal, like that approach to playing guitar.
Well, one of my favorite Velvet songs, which is one you guys recorded on Only Life, is What Goes On. And one of the things I love about it is just like the end part where it's just these rhythm guitars going at it. It's not like these big flashy solos. It's just the churning of the rhythm guitars. And I mean, look, your first album's called Crazy Rhythms. Did you always look at the guitar as a rhythmic instrument, as not as opposed to a melodic instrument, but maybe a little bit more than a melodic instrument?
I can't speak for Glenn, but I certainly did. And what's interesting about a song like What Goes On, I mean, it really, to me, it's something that could just go on indefinitely.
Sure.
You just never tire of it. It could be endless, and it becomes like almost like trance-like, where it totally envelops you in that rhythm. And that's what I find like really appealing.
What was the first guitar you got?
It was probably a Gibson SG that my father bought for me.
Nice.
And then after that, it was, in fact, I was thinking of bringing this guitar out. I no longer have the SG. I gave that to one of my sons, but the guitar that we recorded Crazy Rhythms on, it's a Gibson Les Paul limited edition. So it kind of looks like a melody maker, like a double cutaway. It's small. The fretboard is tighter than my 335, but I may bring that out for next week. I'll have to see. I'll have to get it out of the closet. It's not one that I play anymore.
Nice. That would be cool though. I think of Glenn on his telly and you on the 335, and just that combination of those tones. Although I was going back down some YouTube rabbit holes and found some clips from like around when Crazy Rhythms came out, and Glenn was playing a Strat actually, so it was a little bit different. So I guess he'd switch from the Strat to the telly at some point.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because it took us a while to arrive at the combination that we currently have. And through that exploration of, guitars, we actually arrived at, an important part of the band's sound, which was the percussion that Glenn and I were writing for the songs. And how that came about was we both were playing for a short period of time Strats. And the sound of the two Strats plus the drummer playing like ride cymbal, it just canceled out almost everything. It canceled out the finer parts of the guitar playing. So that's when we decided to take away the cymbals and supplement, that sort of energy level with percussion parts. Right. And then eventually I switched to Gibson, which was the guitar that I just mentioned, the Les Paul. And then Glenn eventually went to Tellys, and I went to my 335. And I think both guitars really complement each other really well.
Yeah, it's just such a distinct, precise sound. I mean, it's just like what I think of as the Feelies sound. And again, with your rhythm playing, and then Glenn having these kind of snaky leads on the telly, it's I'm like just sort of a home guitarist, but I'm totally like sort of in your camp. I mean, not up to your standard, but it's just like rhythm is fine. Like I love playing it as a rhythm instrument because I can't solo, and it's just not, just getting behind that rhythm is what's really fun.
Well, I'm certainly with you. I'm a home guitarist too, so.
There's a clip from, again, around 79 or 80 of you guys doing The Boy with Perpetual Nervousness, and Glenn's on the Strat, and then at some point toward the end, you put down your guitar, and then you start playing percussion too. You're I think, and it's basically like you have the drummer, percussion, and you, and it's just like becomes this, totally rhythmic thing toward the end of it. So like obviously the crazy rhythms were an emphasis from the start.
Yeah, I think the arrangement with The Boy with Perpetual Nervousness. Actually, I play very little guitar on it. Live, it's like all percussion. There's like a little break where you have these little sort of twinkling type guitar notes that I'll stop playing percussion and play, but it's the percussion parts in that song literally come one right after another, and kind of challenging, but I love doing it. It's something completely different. I love playing percussion. I just saw Jonathan Richman up in Asheville, and it was just him and drummer Tommy Larkin, and it was pretty scaled down. Like he would stop playing guitar and put the guitar down and just grab handheld percussion like sleigh bells or cowbell or maracas or something and just start dancing around the stage and playing percussion. It was great.
So did you have any sort of training on percussion, or did you teach yourself that while you were doing all this other stuff?
No, I didn't have any training. It's just really probably a good sense of rhythm, which again, it's not, goes back to that story about Jonathan Richman talking about the Velvet's guitar approach, and it's really not much different. The approach to rhythm guitar is same approach to playing percussion.
Do you remember going to any shows when you were really young and having that sort of light bulb go off and say, wait, I could be doing this, or this is what I want to be doing?
Yeah, so I think, our influences, like growing up, really started with the Beatles, the Stones, groups like that. And I think it never had occurred, even though when I was pretty young and first started listening to the Beatles, I'd kind of play along with Ringo on a stack of books or on my mother's dashboard in the car when I was waiting for her to run an errand or something in the supermarket. And back then, dashboards also had a really great sound compared to today. But it never had occurred to me listening to those groups to become a musician. It wasn't really until I heard like Sterling's approach to guitar, Ron Ashton, and I thought, even there's some like Neil Young leads where they're almost like single note leads, although, we know now that there's always much more when it comes to Neil's playing. And listening to those things that's when the light bulb went off, and I thought I could do that. It's like, especially with Sterling and Ron Ashton, just sounded like something that was obtainable. And even with, their playing, it's, to young ears, it sounds very simple. But after like listening and kind of studying a lot of what they were doing, it's much more going on than
Right.
meets the ears, I guess.
Yeah, and it's just its own thing. Did you start writing songs on your own at some point?
Uh, yeah. So how I taught myself to play was, um, say, say as an example, if there was like a challenging chord to finger, to make it less monotonous, I would just kind of come up with patterns. In fact, I still do that. If I'm listening to someone else's music and there's a chord in there that's, maybe initially challenging, I'll kind of create something around that chord uh, just to make learning it more interesting for me instead of just playing it over and over again. So that was kind of a key component to coming up with new music.
Were you also playing around with the tunings?
Um, yeah, on and off. More over the last couple of years than I did earlier on. Uh, I mean, you could make a whole study of someone like Keith Richards, and his playing is just, it's otherworldly with the tunings that
Sure.
he's doing.
Yeah, well, and there are all these musicians who sort of taught themselves, and they would just sort of, I mean, like someone like Liz Phair in Chicago, who was, a little, came around a little later than you guys, but it would just be like, writing songs and like, all right, I just sort of tuned it this way because that's what I heard, and you're like, what? What was that?
Yeah, and I think there's even when I'm sitting down and playing, and usually whenever I play, which is pretty much every day, I'm just always coming up with something that is interesting to me. I mean, it could be a chord um, that I don't even know what the name of it would be. I mean, like a chord like an A5, like it's just one of those chords that again I just learned what it was well after the fact after I was playing it. It's just like one or two, two strings that you're fretting. Things like that I think come up quite a bit. Just appealing to the ear.
So when you're playing, like playing every day, are you making stuff up? And then are you sort of recording it or documenting it, or are you playing songs you know?
Uh, uh, Actually, all of the above. A lot of times, if I'm playing something that sounds like it could be something that's further developed, I'll just record it on my phone real quick. So because I think we probably forget more things than not.
Sure.
I know a lot of times when we get together and play, um, we got in the habit around time for a witness where we should just because we'd get together and we'd play these long extended jams, and even in sound checks, oh, that could be interesting. Just kind of start honing in on it. And then no sooner than that would happen, we'd forget what we actually played, and it'd just be something that was lost. So, with Time for a Witness, leading up to that, we got in the habit of recording our rehearsals because whenever we get together, we always jam, and then we kind of settle on the business at hand. And it's the same thing with sound checks. So, whenever possible, we always asked our sound person, Andy, to record the sound checks, just so we didn't lose something.
So are there Feely songs that grew out of that, where you went back and you said, "Wait a minute, that was a good bit."
Yeah, I think "Time for a Witness." There's a number of songs on that album that grew out of that.
That's really cool. I love that record, by the way. You don't have that many albums, but that's sort of a sleeper in a way because I just think that album just kind of bursts out of the speakers.
Yeah, I think with that album, our approach, we went up to this farmhouse in Massachusetts that had a studio, and we set up and we played like we would live.
Yeah, that's what it sounds
wasn't,
like.
yeah. I mean, it wasn't everybody separated, by sound barriers and things like that. We were on a stage. This place, it's one of those places that groups like Aerosmith or the Rolling Stones would go to prep for a tour. So they had a stage, but they also had recording rooms. But we, except for like an occasion here or there, we utilized them. But for the most part, we set up as a live band and on the stage.
So how did the songwriting with you and Glenn evolve over the years? Like, I think the first Feelies single was Face La. Just in general, like, would the two of you sit in a room and work out stuff together, or would you each come in with parts, and just how did it work?
It really varied between, depending on the song. I said a lot of the music came out as jams. Some we'd bring, a pretty good structure to a session, a rehearsal, and go from there. There was one that I was recalling recently, Moscow Nights from Crazy Rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
We actually, after a rehearsal, late at night, we went down to this park that had a ball field and near my house, and we worked out some of the parts. Like I don't recollect exactly. They were the parts that would fall like as the intro, the middle break, and the end, like descending part. Otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward song. So we went down and we worked out those parts. But it's evolved over the years. It could be an idea, it could be a complete song. We got in the habit when I moved out of New Jersey to exchanging recordings. We just email each other recordings or put something on, CD so we could listen in the car when we're driving. And with the last album in between, we ended up utilizing a lot of the stuff that we recorded at home. Just like demos, like it could be a single rhythm guitar part or whatever. And we ended up using that. The band played along. And
so those actual parts that you recorded at home were then used in the final recording?
Yeah. I think there were like three songs on In Between that we couldn't replicate the sound. And I know Glenn had mentioned that it was a technique that Norman Petty used in recording Buddy Holly's guitar. And I had recorded my 335 with like a condenser mic up close to the strings and the pickups. And then the 335 was running through an amp that was about six feet away. So it was picking up this ambient sound, but it comes off as almost like a hybrid acoustic guitar, but it's
right.
not. It's a 335, but it's like real clean. And when we set about recording In Between, we couldn't replicate that sound, and both Glenn and I really liked it, so we kept that. And
because the 335 is a hollow body, so you can mic it close as if it were acoustic guitar, but then you also still have it running out through the amp. Right.
Yeah, and the amp was a good distance away, so it acted more as like an amp, as like an ambient. Which I was reading recently. I've always really liked the sound of Paul Simon's guitar in Mrs. Robinson, and he was describing how they recorded it and saying they had, I think it was like 4 microphones, one by the hole, one on the neck, one kind of ambient, but still close, and then even further away, ambient. And that's one I'm going to try sometime in the near future.
would you guys sort of get the musical bed first, and then does Glenn add the lyrics and vocals on it, or are you guys collaborating for that part too? Does that sometimes come at the same time?
No, I think you'd have to ask Glenn about his lyrical approach, but he usually with the things that I'm providing, he adds lyrics afterward. Regarding his own approach, I mean, I know he's kind of said, one thing kind of inspires the next. You're
Right.
playing something, and it kind of does. It's true. I mean, even the pieces that I provide, it's sometimes the melody is right there, and it's just you just pick it out of what's being played.
I mean, you've been doing this for 50 years, and obviously technology changes. You weren't emailing stuff to each other in the 70s and 80s. But is the general way that you guys write together pretty similar still?
And I think it's evolved over time. But I think what has kind of stayed the same is what appeals to us at any given point. So just going back to like the album In Between, when we did Here Before, the previous album to that, we went into a recording studio. And there's everything that's involved when you're working in a recording studio, which is primarily money. I remember we were working on the mix of On and On, which is a song on Here Before, and Yola Tango was playing at Maxwell's, and they were doing their Hanukkah shows, and they wanted Glenn and I, to come by and play a couple songs with them. And we're trying to finish this mix, and I don't think we ever got it right. But the whole time we're working on this song, trying to nail down this mix, we have that in the back of our minds. We have the fact that we're not getting it, and it's kind of costing us money, which is, to me, is like an uncomfortable, unenviable position to be in. You don't want to be thinking about that stuff
Right.
when you're
You don't want to think about the meters running while you're trying to be creative.
Well, exactly. And so when we did In Between, we really liked the sounds that we were getting. It was really very much a do-it-yourself home kind of vibe to it, and there were like sounds, like a creaking floor, or chairs, and just different things like that, which we've always kind of had a high regard for, and we just decided to take that approach. So, I think in that aspect, we were always kind of on the, we've evolved on the same page,
Right.
which is great.
Yeah, In Between has this very warm feel to it. I like when I remember just putting it on, and it just felt kind of like this, again, sort of unified experience of, again, putting you in this mood. And there was something about just the vibe of it that just carried through the whole album that, again, it just seemed warm. Like at times it was a little gentle, but then it also kind of explodes at points. But that was like, I remember when that came out, I was like, oh, this is like really cool record for you guys to be doing at that time and have something that felt so kind of unified.
One of the big appeals for us was it gave us, just going back to the story about On and On and Here Before, we were able to look at some of these parts. We didn't have them all wrapped up like the arrangements, but if there was like a background vocal part, it became more of like, let's try this. If it doesn't work, no big deal. If it works, great. And we didn't have to worry about writing on the clock, so to speak. And, there was one idea, I think, like Glenn had for like using a wine glass for one of the songs. And so we had to go fetch a wine glass that kind of fit the tuning of the song, and Stan played it throughout, like I think about 8 minutes long. So, things like that where you can kind of experiment without having to worry about spending dollars. There's a lot of freedom in doing that.
Have you guys worked up material for another album?
So I think, we wanted to, and if you know anything about the Feelies, we take our time doing everything,
Sure.
And I don't say that in a pretentious manner. It's just who we are. We just kind of, the light bulb goes off, or the feeling emerges that now's the time to take that step. And I think we want to get past these shows. And, we talked about the possibility of doing like almost a combination Feelies and Willie's album. So we have another band called the Willies, and primarily instrumental. And
I saw the Willies open for the Feelies a couple of years ago in, I think it was Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
I flew out for that one. You're like one of the few bands that I would fly out for, but since you don't come out here that often, you were here at Pitchfork, but then didn't do the full set. I'm like, well, I got to go to the East Coast if I want to see the full thing. But yeah, I saw the Willies open for the Feelies, and I had not seen the Willies before.
The Willies really go back. It kind of came about between Crazy Rhythms and the Good Earth, and so we started looking into music like that. We did a soundtrack for a movie. It was Susan Seidelman's first film, Smithereens, where we scored that. And then more recently, Glenn and I scored a film called No Longer Not Yet. It's by Gibson Fraser, and uses a lot of Feelies material, but also the music that we wrote for the film. And then we do have recordings and various pieces. So we may do a combination like Willie's Feelies, like with more typical song structured music, and then more music that sounds like the Willies.
Right. And just to be clear for listeners, it's the same personnel in both bands, just a slightly different approach.
Yeah, although the Willies, we play with John and Tony Bumgartner from Speed to Plow.
Right.
Longtime friends. We've, on the Willies shows, they sit in on a number of songs.
Right. When you look back on the records that you've put out, did they get to the point that you wanted them to get to? Or like, do you go back to for Crazy Rhythms and think, yeah, that just turned out right? Or this one, well, I wish this one was tweaked a little bit. Like, how do you sort of go back and view those records?
Well, I don't listen to them really. I mean, much unless we're doing a show like next week where there are songs that we haven't played or maybe played once or twice, years ago, and I have to, kind of familiarize myself with the arrangement and the parts, things like that. Songs that I don't really think about much, but I think the only thing I would say about it is I think whenever we approached a new album, what preceded it was always influenced by that. So we tried to get away from what we were doing previously, even though at the root of it, it's still the kind of basic premise of what the Feelies do. But I think with Crazy Rhythms, there was a lot going on. We were novices as producers, and there was a lot of knob turning and discovering the sounds. But I think the thing that I recall the most about that is our willingness to kind of go there. Find like these little hallways in the studio where the reverb actually sounded better than the reverb plate that the studio offered. And it wasn't even part of the studio. Discovering things like that, how to, putting a microphone up against the wall where you're singing into it and you're getting like the bounce back off the wall. So there was a lot of discovery with that album. And you fast forward to in between, just, what I just commented on, that just discovering how to record that where you're not worrying about money and, just being like what Glenn is kind of referred to as being off the clock, which is, gives you a lot of freedom. But I think in answer to your question, yeah, there are certainly songs that we've recorded that you say, wow, we probably could have done a better job with that. And we're not a real patient band when it comes to recording like basic tracks. I mean, we finally arrived at that point, but we'd always want to move on. And, I think at a certain point we had that, well, we could fix this in the mix or with overdub sort of approach. But I think we've gotten a little bit better at doing that, where we recognize something right on the onset. But the song I was talking about earlier, On and On, I think that could have sounded much better. I'd love to go back and redo it.
I think of you guys as being precise but not fussy. Like, I can't see you sort of doing 100 takes of a song and especially not like punching in this bit from this one or this bit from this one, because I always think that performances have a much more organic, unfussy feel, while at the same time, it seems like you know exactly what you're trying to get out of it.
Said honor thy error, and we certainly do. I don't, when I read things about the Beatles, recording things like 80 times or 40 times over, it's mind blowing to me that they would have the patience. I
don't know if they did have the patience. I think they drove them nuts.
Yeah, it probably
Paul, we
did,
don't want to do Maxwell Silverhammer or Obladi Oblada one more time.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's all true, but I think the end result with them kind of speaks for itself. But we're the complete opposite. We want to move on and kind of get to other things. Right.
Well, with Crazy Rhythms, you have the original 4-piece. I mean, I don't know if the original, because actually you had other members first. But you have the 4-person lineup for Crazy Rhythms, and then there's a 6-year gap before the Good Earth, and you have the Tripes record in between there. You have the Young Woo, you have the Willies. At the time you got to the Good Earth, did you look at like the Feelies as sort of this one-off that just did Crazy Rhythms, or did you always know you were going to come back and continue the Feelies even if it was with this other lineup?
We don't think about that much in advance. We never have. Just who we are. So I don't think. I mean, I think we're pretty hyper cognizant of when things are presented in front of us, and the reforming of the Feelies pre The Good Earth was one of those examples. It just seemed like, okay, this where everybody's comfortable with each other, and let's see where this leads. And eventually, it kind of morphed from the Willies back into the Feelies, and it went from there.
Right, because you picked up Stan and Brenda. Obviously, you played with Dave before, and at some point, the 5 of you just started playing like older Feely songs, newer songs.
I think a combination of both.
And you're doing so on Friday night you're doing The Good Earth in its entirety, and then Saturday night you're doing Crazy Rhythms in its entirety. Is it a different challenge to play one than the other?
They're both challenging. Like I said, some of the songs we haven't done in quite a while. So from that perspective, it's, there's a challenge there.
What are the songs from those records that you just have not played live? I mean, I could sort of guess at them, but I'll let you do that. So
with Crazy Rhythms, we haven't played Moscow Nights in quite a while. Forces at Work. We haven't played and The Boy with Perpetual Nervousness. That's one that we almost never play.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the one that I was thinking that I just hadn't seen you guys do.
Yeah, I mean, we've done it a couple times. We did this All Tomorrow's Parties Festival years ago, where they had asked us to do Crazy Rhythms in its entirety, and we did it then. But it's not one that we normally do. On The Good Earth, the song Slow Down and Tomorrow Today. I think, conversely, we've done a lot of these songs live on a regular basis, but there are a few that we seldom play.
Are there ones from the other albums that you're pulling out that you haven't played as much as well?
I don't know. We haven't established a set list for the non-Crazy Rhythms Good Earth sets yet. So there could be. So it's hard to say.
And why are these your only two shows of 2026? Usually you'll do, like, maybe you'll go down to Philadelphia, you'll go up to Cambridge or something like that. Woodstock.
We're not playing that much anymore live. I don't know, we'll have to see where it leads, but getting in a van and traveling 5 hours is just not enjoyable for anybody. So that's primarily why.
Do you think you'll still do these annual shows, or is there a chance that this is just kind of, it for the live version of the Feelies?
It could be it. Well, I can only speak for myself, Mark. Like I said, we, as a band, I don't think there's ever been anything written in stone. But it wouldn't surprise me.
Does it get harder just in terms of just the basic playing these? I mean, you guys play these very energetic shows. Everyone's obviously getting older. If you're doing a 50th anniversary show, does it just get harder after a while?
Well, again, I can only speak for myself. I have to, drive from South Carolina up to New Jersey to rehearse, play these shows. It's an enjoyable drive, but it's still driving over a 2-day period to practice. What becomes more of a challenge, I think, is, if you don't play live, 7 or 8 months pass, it becomes more difficult. I mean, you could practice every day. And I know Glenn and I have talked about it before. We'll have like 3-hour rehearsals, and it's different than sitting and playing guitar at home, like standing. And, typically, like, I sit down when I play at home, and, I don't know what you do, but I'm sure you probably don't stand playing guitar. It's more strenuous physically, mentally, to take on as much music as we do is a lot. It's not unusual for us to play 3+ hours, when we do perform these days. So,
right. And then 2 nights in a row.
It's a bit of a challenge, but we're all looking forward to it.
Yeah, I was talking with Dave Gregory from XTC, and he was saying that you sort of use it or lose it. I was asking him if he got back up, he could play, a song like Scissor Man, which is a very fast, older, XTC song. And he's like, yeah, I don't think I could play that one anymore because I just haven't been, even though he plays every day and he's got a huge collection of guitars and everything. He's just like, I think that would be really challenging to play it at this point.
Does he still play live?
I think he sits in with other bands sometimes, but I don't think XTC obviously isn't reuniting, and they haven't played live since 1982. So, because everyone's always trying to get XTC to get back together. And he's like, if we got back together, we couldn't really, it would be a challenge to play that stuff anyway. He was just like, the playing at the beginning of Dear God, it's like I would struggle with that because it's just, I just don't play that part anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment on his part. And that's what it is. You can play around with people. You could sit at home and play, but it's still not the same as getting in front of an audience for several hours and covering a lot of music. It's really two different things. So it is a challenge.
In general, when you look back on the Feelies, is the stage kind of your, to use a corny phrase, is it sort of your happy place? Like, is that where you feel like most of the Feelies magic came out, as opposed to, working in the studio or, songwriting on your own or whatever?
I don't know. I would say, I know, and again, just speaking for myself, I've become more and more uncomfortable playing on a stage as time has gone by. The appeal for playing live is when you do finally kind of nail down a song, it does become kind of all enveloping, where you're almost kind of disappearing into the music. That's something that's really interesting to me. And then you have this symbiotic relationship with an audience, and not always, but it does become apparent, and it, when it does happen, and it's great. But I think Yeah, over time, I've just become more and more uncomfortable playing, and it just, I like the idea of recording, and I think that's ultimately how we'll continue as a band.
So you think you will continue recording, but maybe the live shows are like, winding down.
Yeah, hopefully, I think so. I think everyone wants to still do that. Recently, I mentioned that film score that Glenn and I did, and we, really, we exchanged files through the mail. I went up, and Glenn's got in our rehearsal space at his house. He's got a kind of a recording setup as well. So we recorded things up there, and it was a great experience, and that's why we wanted to do it. So, yeah, I think that's a real good possibility, and that's something that we still want to do.
And I realize you guys haven't set the set lists yet, but do you have new songs that you're going to be playing over the weekend?
We've discussed the two albums that we're doing, and music that we're doing with guests that we have both nights, but we haven't discussed that other set at all yet.
I look forward to hearing what you guys come up with. Another thing that I talked to Dave Gregory about was they put out for Record Store Day this live bootleg of, they call it Live Boots, of 1981 performance, and everything, they're playing is really fast, and he was looking back on it like, I don't know why we were speeding everything up like that. My association with live shows was that, bands would often play the songs faster live, like you guys always did, REM did. Is there sort of a optimal speed that songs should be played live compared to the studio version? And I don't feel like you're racing through the stuff as much as you were like in 88 or something like that, but like what's the sweet spot on that?
A lot of that was probably nervous energy. There was a comment that one of our managers, Steve Fallon, who owned Coyote Records and Maxwell's, made at one point about the band, that he couldn't stay in the same room when we were playing because he thought we would just explode on stage. And it was like this sound that was like so fast that it doesn't sound that way when you're playing it, or it doesn't feel that way when you're playing it. But I've listened back to live recordings back then, and just like the story you were just saying, and I find it unlistenable. It's like so fast. But I think we've kind of found a much better groove as we've gotten older, and to my ears, it just sounds a lot better.
Who's setting the tempo on stage? Is it Stan because he's the drummer, or is it maybe you because you're sort of kicking it off on the rhythm guitar?
Either Stan, Glenn, or myself, depending on the song. Usually those three. I think less so with Dave and Brenda, but primarily because there's songs that Glenn starts, there's songs that I start, songs that Stan starts. Sometimes he'll count off, which I'm not a big fan of, because the count off a lot of times it then becomes part of the song. It's like, another sound that you're introducing to the song. So we've kind of had that discussion. But, a lot of times it'd be one of us three.
Do you consider yourself part of the rhythm section of the band? I mean, clearly you're playing those rhythms. Like, so like that maybe you're sort of more locked in with the drummer than like a guitarist and a drummer would be in other bands.
I just consider myself 1/5 of the band. I don't actually think of it in more defined terms. I think, when I look at the way the band plays live, I think primarily it really bounces back and forth between Stan and myself, and Glenn, Stan, and myself, where we're playing off of each other, and we're which allows Brenda to kind of go off and play a little bit higher up on the neck and more melodic parts, and Dave's playing along with the three of us, but we're kind of weaving in and out, particularly with the guitars. But I think traditionally with rock bands, it's this approach of bass and drums. That's really not the Feelies. So, although Brenda may argue with that perspective, but I think it's the three of us play rhythmically off of each other.
Interesting. And Brenda being a little more of a melodic bass player than sort of holding down the rhythm bass player.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, she may disagree, but I think so.
So, and the Feelies broke up in 92 and got back together in 2008. Was there anything about the band that changed over that time? Like when you got back together, did you have sort of a different way of playing or a different perspective? Or was it really like, 16 years just passed and here we are?
Well, it's kind of, first off, we never kind of officially broke up. It was just, it ran its course and we stopped playing, and a lot of time passed. It didn't seem like a lot of time, but we stayed in touch. I was living in Florida, and one of my sons was going to school in New Jersey, so I'd make trips up to see him, and Glenn and I stayed in touch because we'd get requests for, songs for like sync licensing requests, things like that. So we stayed in touch, and the band didn't stop playing on a negative note, which was important. So, we kind of always kind of talked about getting together and doing some playing. And just like I said earlier, a lot of times when things are presented in front of us, that's the impetus for our own movement. And in 2008, that impetus was Sonic Youth asking us to play a show. And it was to kind of request that if we didn't do it, we could very well still today be thinking about getting together. And it was like, well, if we take our first step here with this, we had to make a commitment one way or the other. And once we made the commitment, then I think everything kind of fell into place. But that was the impetus for us getting back together, was that request.
Right. I think it was a Battery Park show, and you did some shows at Maxwell's to kind of warm up for that. I mean, was it sort of the proverbial, getting back on the bike, or was it like, oh, we really need to work to get this back into Feely shape?
I think initially what I recall about it was more logistically how we set up in Glenn's basement. The first time we rehearsed, the setup where we were positioned wasn't working at all. So the next day we repositioned everybody, and then it was. So it's something like as simple as that, where, okay, now, and we still set up that way when we rehearse. And I guess it was. I mean, obviously there's, some moments of rust that you need to work off. But I think the one thing about the band is everybody really does practice for the practice. We don't want to, no one in the band really wants to be the one member that is not prepared and slowing everything down. So it's like kind of letting down, others in the band if you're not prepared. So we don't want to get, sidelined because of that. So when we do get together and rehearse, and even back then in 2008, we know we had a good sense of what we were getting into and what everyone was expecting of each other.
What in 92, this is after Time for a Witness had come out and you guys had toured, what had sort of felt like it had played out at that point to you, and what was it that sort of changed by the time you got back together?
I mean, it was primarily my doing. I had an older sister that was had developed a terminal illness, and I was pretty close to my sister, and she put me in charge of her end of life situation, and that, just like playing became like a big distraction. I'd start having these like anxiety attacks. I'd be looking down at the set list when we were playing live and thinking, I really can't wait for this to be over. I got 3 more songs I have to get through. And then I'd have these anxiety attacks where if the band was getting an encore, I couldn't go out and play. And that's when I, kind of realized I had to step away from playing. It was one of those things where we always decided that when it stopped being fun, we would stop doing it. If we couldn't control the way our music was presented or created, we'd rather go sell shoes in the mall. It was just one of those things. It's how the band has always been. That's what happened to me, and that's what sidelined the band until a number of years later.
And you were in Florida at the time. Were you still playing music every day, or did you really put all of that aside and do something else?
I put it aside. I literally put the guitars under my bed, and that's where they stayed. And it wasn't until much later that one of my sons expressed an interest, and I bought him an acoustic guitar. And it wasn't like a real expensive one, but it was one that just you'd leave on the couch, you'd just leave around the house. And because it was accessible, I started playing again just because it was always available versus, lugging the guitars out and hooking them up to amplifiers and things like that. So that was a big part of it.
And you were like working another day job in the meantime?
Yes.
What were you doing?
I had a job that had to do with like physical security. So like, scanner IDs and things like that, which I found interesting until I stopped doing that.
I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys in Jersey City, and this has been great to get to talk to you. Is White Eagle Hall, is that, it's not Maxwell's, but has that become sort of a nice home for you guys?
Yeah, it's bigger than Maxwell's, about 4 or 5 times bigger, and it's a really cool space. I think it's a pretty old building. The connection there is with Todd Abramson, who booked Maxwell's after Steve Fallon left, and so we've known Todd for a very long time, and I know he was working on setting up White Eagle Hall right around the time that Maxwell's was getting ready to close down. So, that's what's kind of nice about it. We've kind of surrounded ourselves with people we've known for years. The guests that we're having playing, knowing Todd, we're looking forward to seeing a lot of people we haven't seen in a long time, and just looking forward to the shows.
Yeah. And that's where you recorded the Velvet Underground album too, right?
Yes. Yeah. White Eagle Hall.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure listening to you for so many years, and I will say hi to you when I'm out there, but I really appreciate you talking, and we'll see and hear you soon.
Okay. That's great. Appreciate it as well, Mark.
That is all for episode 226 of Caropop. Thanks so much to Bill Millian for feeding our deep fascination with the Feelies. The Feelies' 50th anniversary shows are May 22nd and 23rd at White Eagle Hall in Jersey City, New Jersey. The Good Earth will be played in its entirety on May 22nd, and Crazy Rhythms will be performed on May 23rd. Go to thefeeliesweb.com for information and tickets. The site also includes links to buy their albums. You could find most Feelies albums at the Bar None website as well. And if you enjoy this conversation, I recommend going back to earlier Caropop conversations with Feelies lead guitarist, singer Glenn Mercer and drummer Stan Demeski. Caropop is produced by Chris Wake, who always finds a way to be doing it again, even with raised eyebrows. Thanks to all who support Caropop. If you'd like to throw something into the Caropop kitty, we'd be much appreciative, and I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Please go to caropop.com. Thanks so much for listening and being here. I'm Mark Caro. Please follow Caropop on the so-called socials at Caropopcast. You can follow me as well at Mark Caro at MarkCaro. Please share this episode, subscribe here and on YouTube. Tell your friends, and return next week for another Caropop conversation. Thanks.